There's a counselor in Colorado who believes she can counsel someone out of being gay or trans, and the state said, no, that's harmful pseudoscience and you can't practice it on minors. She said, First Amendment. And now the Supreme Court will decide whether sincerely held belief is a license to harm children. This isn't about religion versus government, it's about protection versus permission. I'm Mike Smithgall, and this is today's Mic Drop. Now, let's be clear. Conversion therapy exists because of religion. Full stop. Without theology, there's no disorder to cure. There's no brokenness to fix. The entire premise depends on religious doctrine that says LGBTQ plus is sinful, it's wrong, or it's against God's design. And you know what? You're allowed to believe that sincerely, deeply, with your whole heart. In fact, I will support you even if I don't agree with you. I'll support your right to believe that. But what you're not allowed to do is strap that belief to a therapy license and call trauma treatment. So we're talking about Chiles versus Salazar, and it's not just about one case in Colorado. For over a decade, states have been passing laws to ban conversion therapy for minors. 23 states and Washington, D.C. have these protections on the books. Now, the Supreme Court has been asked to hear challenges to these laws before, and it has consistently refused to do so. So, what's changed? Well, as you might have guessed, it's the court's composition. That changed. With a 6-3 conservative majority, the Alliance Defending Freedom saw an opening, and they engineered a case designed to give the court exactly what it wanted: a chance to redefine religious freedom as a right to ignore professional standards. Now, this isn't about whether faith can override evidence. It's about whether belief can exempt you from professional standards, and whether the Supreme Court will let religion become a loophole in child protection law. In Colorado, licensed therapists are prohibited from attempting to change or suppress a minor's sexual orientation or gender identity. Now, Kaylee Chiles, a Christian counselor backed by the Alliance Defending Freedom, ADF, claims that law violates her First Amendment rights. Her argument: therapy is speech, not conduct. And because her speech is religiously motivated, the state can't regulate it. Now, Colorado's response: this isn't about speech. It's about protecting minors from a discredited and demonstrably harmful practice. The Supreme Court heard the oral arguments today on October 7th, 2025. Now, a decision is not expected before the summer of 2026. But here's the problem with that argument. It ignores science. Decades of research show conversion therapy doesn't work, and it causes measurable psychological harm, anxiety, depression, PTSD, suicide risk. The American Psychological Association, the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics have all issued condemnations. There is no credible evidence that sexual orientation or gender identity can be changed through counseling. So let's talk about what harm actually looks like. Survivors of conversion therapy report being subject to aversion techniques, being shown images while receiving electric shocks, being forced to snap rubber bands against their wrists while thinking about same-sex attraction, being told their identity makes them broken or disgusting or an abomination. The statistics are devastating. LGBTQ plus youth who undergo conversion therapy are more than twice as likely to attempt suicide compared to those who don't. They're 3 times as more likely to use illegal drugs, and they're more than twice as likely to experience severe depression. These aren't just numbers. These are kids whose families told them that they needed to be fixed. Kids who internalize the message that something fundamental about who they are is so wrong, it requires intervention. And when that intervention fails, and it always fails, they're left believing that they are the failure. But here's the deal. ADF knows this. In their Supreme Court petition, ADF cited a 2016 study by sexuality researcher Dr. Lisa Diamond and law professor Clifford Roski. But here's what they didn't tell the court. Diamond and Roski's study actually condemns conversion therapy as harmful and ineffective. ADF cherry-picked quotes from their work, leaving out the parts where the researchers explicitly said conversion therapy causes elevated rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide. That conclusion, the actual thesis of the paper, was on the same page that ADF quoted from. They just left that part out. When Diamond and Roski found out, they were furious. Roski told the Guardian, "It's deceptive. Lawyers owe a duty of candor to the court. You cannot offer false evidence. They claim our work supports conversion therapy when our work clearly and specifically condemns conversion therapy on the same page they're citing." He added, "This is the most upsetting use of my scholarship that has ever happened in my career. It's upsetting because this is lethally dangerous to LGBTQ plus kids." Now, Diamond said, "That's what's diabolical about using me. They know they are misrepresenting my views, and it also feels very hard to counter because it's not coming from facts or reason, it's coming from animus." Both researchers filed a brief with the Supreme Court to correct the record. And the brief wasn't optional, it was necessary, because ADF's petition to the highest court in the land was built on a foundation of lies. This isn't a good faith disagreement about evidence. It's a legal strategy built on deliberate deception. And that deception matters because the law ADF is challenging already carves out protection for religious speech. Conversion therapy is religiously motivated. That's not an attack, that's a fact. But the industry exists because certain conservative Christians and Orthodox traditions teach that LGBTQ plus identities are sinful or disordered. But there is some good news. Not all religious people agree with this. Many Christians, Jews, Muslims, and people of faith oppose conversion therapy. The United Church of Christ, the Reformed Judaism, the Episcopal Church, and countless faith leaders have condemned it as harmful and unethical. Religious belief isn't monolithic. What we're talking about here is a specific subset of religious practice, one that harms vulnerable kids. Now, here's something critical that often gets left out of this entire conversation. Colorado law already includes a religious exemption. People engaged in the practice of religious ministry are explicitly exempt from the ban. Let me just say that one more time. People engaged in the practice of religious ministry are explicitly exempt from the ban. So if you're a pastor, a priest, a rabbi, an imam, and you're providing religious counseling as part of ministry, you can still counsel people according to your religious beliefs about sexuality, about gender. The law doesn't touch that. What it does regulate is licensed mental health professionals, therapists, counselors, psychologists, people that hold state-issued license that come with professional and ethical obligations. So when the ADF argues that this law silences religious speech, they're being flat out dishonest. Religious speech is protected. What's regulated is professional medical practice. Chiles isn't being told that she can't believe homosexuality is sinful. She's not being told she can't talk about her beliefs. She's not even being told that she's being prevented from referring clients to religious counselors who share her views. She's just being told she can't use her professional license to practice a discredited, harmful therapy on minors. And religious liberty has never been absolute. You can't refuse chemotherapy for your kid and call it faith. You can't perform surgery in the church basement and call it ministry. You can't withhold insulin from a diabetic kid because you believe in prayer over medicine, even if your belief is absolutely 100% sincere. Religious freedom ends where harm to others begin. Conversion therapy crosses that line, and no amount of theology makes that okay. All right, but what do you think? Where should the law draw a line between sincerely held belief and demonstrably harmful professional practice? Let me know in the comments below. And hey, while you're there, do me a favor. If you're the kind of person who appreciates this kind of secular analysis on the collision of faith and law, please hit the like button, and subscribe to the channel. It's the easiest way to support this kind of work. All right, let's get back to it. Now, therapists aren't podcasters. They aren't YouTubers like me. They're licensed professionals operating under standards of care that demand adherence to evidence and ethics. When a therapist speaks in a session, they're not just free floating expression, that's professional conduct. And courts have consistently allowed limits on professional speech when public health is at stake. A surgeon can't claim free speech to ignore sterilization protocols. That would be insane. A pharmacist can't prescribe bleach for COVID and call it religious conviction. And a therapist can't practice discredited methods and hide behind the First Amendment. Why? Because licenses come with standards. That's the deal. When you get a medical license, a therapy license, a pharmaceutical license, you're entering into a contract with the state. The state gives you legal authority to practice. In exchange, you agree to follow evidence-based standards and professional ethics and regulations designed to protect the public health. You don't get to pick and choose which standards apply for you based on personal belief. If you could, the entire framework collapses. If religious speech suddenly overrides that framework, professional regulation itself becomes optional. And that's the goal here. Not just to protect conversion therapy, but to blow open legal pathways where sincerely held beliefs exempt you from any rule you don't like. This case isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of a larger strategy. Use the First Amendment to carve religious exemptions out of neutral laws. We've seen it with religious employers denying contraceptive coverage, forcing beliefs into healthcare decisions. We've seen it with businesses refusing LGBTQ customers and rebranding discrimination as conscience. And now we're seeing it in licensed therapy, making pseudoscience a protected belief. If this works, the playbook extends. Let me walk you through one example of how this logic spreads. Imagine a pharmacist who believes hormonal birth control is morally wrong, that it's a form of abortion. Under current law, that pharmacist can't refuse to fill a valid prescription just because they're personal beliefs. They're a licensed professional with a duty to serve the public. But if ADF wins this case, here's the argument they're going to be able to make. They're going to be able to say dispensing medication involves explaining how to use it, when to take it, potential side effects. That's all speech. And if my religious beliefs say this medication is immoral, you can't compel my speech by making me provide it. That's First Amendment. The same logic applies to a surgeon who believes certain procedures violate God's law, to a therapist who thinks antidepressants are unnecessary because prayer is sufficient, to a medical professional who refuses to treat transgender patients because they believe gender dysphoria isn't real. They will simply say, it's my sincerely held religious beliefs and you can't regulate my speech. It's medical misinformation packaged as ministry. This question isn't just about conversion therapy. It's about whether faith becomes a permission slip to ignore professional standards when vulnerable people, especially kids, are in your care. All right, so let's zoom out and look at what hangs in the balance. As mentioned earlier, 23 states plus Washington, D.C. have laws banning conversion therapy for minors. That's more than half the country. If the Supreme Court strikes down this Colorado law, all of these protections could fail. We're talking about millions of LGBTQ plus youth, kids who are already at elevated risk for bullying, family rejection, homelessness, and suicide. They're losing the one legal protection that says licensed professionals can't subject them to pseudoscience. And it's not just conversion therapy laws at risk. The medical boards, psychology licensing bodies, social work associations, they all have ethical codes that prohibit harmful practices. If religious speech can override these codes, professional self-regulation becomes completely meaningless. The American Psychological Association is watching this case. The American Medical Association is watching this case. State medical boards are watching this case because they know that if the Supreme Court rules that professional speech protections override evidence-based regulation, their ability to maintain ethical standards completely collapses. And beyond conversion therapy, other cases are waiting in the wings. Gender affirming care bans, abortion counseling restrictions, vaccine mandate challenges. All of them are watching this Chiles versus Salazar to see if sincerely held beliefs become the magic phrase that overrides any regulation you don't like. The stakes here aren't hypothetical, they're immediate, they're vast, and they're about far more than one counselor in Colorado. The Supreme Court hasn't ruled yet, but here's what we already know. Conversion therapy is a fraud. It doesn't work. It causes harm. And every major medical organization in the country agrees. The only question left is whether 9 judges will call it that, or will they sanctify it under the banner of religious freedom. All right, that's my 2 cents, unblessed and unfiltered. As always, agree or disagree. That's what I got for you. When the Supreme Court's decision comes down, again, probably in the summer of 2026, we'll know whether evidence still matters in American law or whether sincerely held belief is now a free pass from regulation. Until then, remember this. You can believe whatever you want about who people should love or how they should live. I will support your right to do that even if I disagree with your belief. But the moment you turn that belief into a business and slap a license on it and practice it on kids, you're not exercising freedom. You're inflicting harm. And no court, not a single one, should call that protected speech. Now, I'm going to keep an eye out for the court ruling, and when they do, I will make sure I let you know and a follow-up and a part 2 for this. But in the meantime, thanks for tuning in. I'm Mike Smithgall, and this was today's Mic Drop. Hey, I really hope you enjoyed today's show. Before you go, make sure you like and subscribe to the show and tell a friend. It really helps us grow. If you'd like more great content from us, be sure to check us out right here on YouTube. You can also find us wherever you get your podcasts and check out our blog at atheistville.com. Until we talk again, remember reason and compassion go a very long way.